To access interventions, simply go to Students and Interventions. This is the interventions dashboard. This will show members of staff every intervention that's happening in school that they have access to. If a member of staff has created their own intervention, they will be able to see their own interventions here. Members of staff with the correct privileges will be able to see all interventions going on in the school. So let's create an intervention. So I'm going to create an attendance intervention that's going to target students with below 90% attendance. So the first thing I need to do is give it a name. Get a description. Now I don't need to set the subject here. If you wanted to create, say, a reading intervention or a subject-specific intervention, you could set a subject in here. Now the subject is set at Arbor MIS level in a predefined list. So I'm just going to put other. You can also set categories. The intervention categories can be set by going to Set Up an Intervention Category. I'm going to set this as behaviour, emotional and social. Again, it's completely possible to set any categories that you want. The subject and category fields are used as a way to report on interventions, to group interventions and to filter interventions. So if you wanted to filter interventions by subject or by category, that's completely possible. The next field asks us how many intervention groups you'd like to create. Within interventions in Arbor, you can have different groups for each intervention. So you could have an interventions group in the morning and one in the afternoon. You could have different groups for different teachers or different teaching assistants. That's entirely up to you. In this case, I'm going to create two groups. Okay, I'm going to start this intervention at the beginning of term and I'm going to run it until Christmas. You'll notice in the last field it talks about a review date. An intervention review evaluates the progress of the intervention. It's possible to have as many reviews as you want at different points throughout the year. Within an intervention review, you can look at things like costs, you can look at how successful the intervention is, you can look at the different groups within the intervention to see which is working, which isn't. You can look at which students were enrolled in the intervention, which students are currently enrolled in the intervention, and it then allows you to either extend that intervention, to stop the intervention, or just continue. So I'm going to set the review date as yesterday. I'm going to work on the assumption this intervention has been going on all year. So, the next step. Okay, so the next step in creating our intervention is to define what we call a participant criteria and an outcome. Now, if you don't want to do this step, or you simply want to skip it, at the bottom here, you can skip the wizard. By skipping the wizard, you'll instantly be able to get started with your intervention. We created an idea of a participant criteria. Now, what a participant criteria does is it allows you to target specific groups of students. So, in this case, I'm going to target all students with less than 90% attendance. Now, those students won't be automatically enrolled on the intervention, but it will help to filter and give you a list of all the students that you should be targeting. So in this case, I'm going to look at attendance, and I'm going to add a filter. These filters are taken from Arbor's custom report writer. So if you've used it, they should be familiar to you. So I'm going to look at every student with below 95% attendance. I'm going to save that. And there you'll see. You could add as many participant criteria as you want. So if I wanted to target all boys with below 90% attendance, I could do. If I wanted to link that to an assessment grade point, then I could. If you were doing an academic subject, for instance geography, and you wanted to target every GCSE geography student who was achieving below a level 5, you could do that. If you were looking at behaviour, you could look at students' behaviour patterns. If you were looking at all students within a certain custom group in Arbor, so if you had a predefined custom group, you could also define them here. If you don't define any participant criteria, Arbor will assume that you want to include or potentially include every student in school. That's particularly useful if you have an intervention, say an ongoing mental health intervention where you want to just enroll and off-roll students as and when you think it's necessary. Okay, the next step is to define an outcome. An outcome is an expectation that you have at the end of the intervention. So in this case, I'm going to go back to attendance again, and I'm going to say that these students should have above 95% attendance. So above 95% attendance. Okay. Again, you can define an outcome of an intervention without defining participant criteria. You can define participant criteria without defining an outcome, or you don't have to define either. In Arbor, when you're running an intervention, it's possible for students to be enrolled in an intervention for a limited period of time and then unenrolled. This isn't a continuous thing that students have to be enrolled in throughout the whole process. Okay, when we're finished, we click Next.